Well, well, well. Look who just got slapped by the truth. Look who just found out that everything they thought they knew about you was a lie they told themselves. You're sitting there right now, and somewhere out there, they're shaking. Not from cold, not from fear of the future, but from the one thing they never prepared for, the moment they realized, with their whole chest, that you were always the one. You were always the architect. You were always the secret boss operating in silence, while they were out here practicing on your name, running drills with your reputation, and rehearsing strategies designed to stop someone they never fully understood. Now available, The Art of Reading People, Dark Psyche, Edition 1. They studied you for years, and still couldn't decode you. This book teaches you to decode them first. Master the silent language of behavior, intention, and hidden motive. Stop being surprised by people. Start seeing them clearly. Link in description. This isn't a celebration. This is a reckoning. This is the moment the curtain gets pulled all the way back, and what stands behind it isn't a broken version of you. It's the version they were terrified of. The version they knew existed, the one they whispered about in rooms you weren't invited into, the one they tried to minimize, dilute, and quietly erase, before you could ever look in the mirror and see what they saw, because what they saw scared them. Not your weakness, not your failures, your potential, your clarity, your unshakable, undeniable, impossible to replicate frequency. They just got slapped by the truth, and the truth doesn't ask permission. It doesn't knock. It doesn't wait for the right time. It arrives like winter arrives, without warning, without mercy, without apology. And the truth that just hit them, the truth that slapped them right across their carefully constructed narrative, is this: you were him, you were her, you were it. This whole time, while they were running their little experiments and casting their little spells of doubt, you were the original, you were the blueprint, and they were just practicing. Let's not be naive about this. Let's not dress it up in polite language or pretend it was confusion or circumstance. What they were doing had a name. It had a strategy. It had a goal. And the goal was to make sure you never stood up tall enough to block their light. Because the moment you stood at your full height, their shadow disappeared. And people who have been living off their shadow, people who have built an identity around being bigger than you, they cannot survive in a world where you rise. They simply cannot. So they did what threatened people always do. They studied you, not out of admiration, out of desperation. They analyzed your patterns, tracked your movements, paid attention to your circles, monitored your energy, all while pretending to be neutral, all while wearing the mask of indifference. Oh, I don't even think about them. Oh, they're not relevant to me. But the obsession, the obsession told a completely different story. Because indifference doesn't study. Indifference doesn't rehearse. Indifference doesn't lose sleep. Only fear does that. They were practicing on you. Let that settle into your bones for a second. Every attack they launched was a rehearsal. Every rumor they spread was a drill. Every time they tried to undermine your confidence, destabilize your focus, or infiltrate your inner circle, they were training. Training for a battle they believed they were winning. Training to defeat someone they never understood. And that is the most devastating irony of all. Because you can't win a war against someone whose nature you've fundamentally misread. And they misread yours completely. They thought you were fragile because you were quiet. They mistook your patience for weakness. They confused your refusal to engage with their chaos for an inability to fight back. They looked at your stillness and saw surrender. They looked at your silence and heard defeat. They looked at your soft exterior and assumed there was nothing underneath but air and apology. They were wrong. They were catastrophically, irreversibly wrong. And now the truth has arrived, and it doesn't look anything like what they planned for. The truth looks like you, standing, whole, unmoved, still here, still building, still compounding, still accumulating evidence of a life that was never for them to understand, never for them to approve, and never for them to control. They spent all that time sharpening their knives, and you spent that same time building armor they couldn't see, because the best armor isn't visible. The best armor is the kind of character and clarity that makes their attack slide off. You like water off granite, and granite doesn't apologize for being hard. Here is what they will never be able to accept, process, or recover from. You didn't become this after them. You were this before them. Everything they tried to strip from you was never theirs to take. The confidence they tried to erode, built before they arrived. The vision they tried to cloud, formed before they even knew your name. The identity they tried to rewrite, carved from something so deep and so ancient in you that their words couldn't reach the roots. They were scratching at the surface of a mountain and calling it demolition. You were the secret boss, not because someone gave you the title, not because you campaigned for the position, not because you announced it, declared it, or demanded it be recognized, but because the role was embedded in you from the beginning, in the way you saw the world differently, in the way problems that paralyzed others became puzzles you solved quietly, in the way you moved through rooms and something in the air shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. People felt it, even the ones who pretended they didn't, especially the ones who pretended they didn't. And here is the part that destroys them. They knew. On some level, in some corner of their awareness, they always knew. That's why they watched you so closely. That's why they needed to know your every move. That's why they couldn't just ignore you and walk away. Because you can ignore something average. You can walk past something ordinary without a second glance. But something extraordinary, something that carries weight you can feel without touching it, that you cannot ignore, that pulls at you, that haunts you. And they were haunted. They tried to practice being you. Did you notice that? The way certain things you did quietly suddenly became trends in their world. The way strategies you used first showed up in their playbook later. The way your aesthetic, your energy, your particular brand of quiet intensity started appearing in the people who claimed to be over you. Imitation isn't flattery in this context. Imitation in this context is confession. It's the loudest possible admission that what you had was something they wanted and couldn't build from scratch. So they studied the blueprint, your blueprint, and called it their own. But a copy can never be an original. A rehearsal can never be a performance. A practice run can never be the real thing. No matter how many times they replicate the surface, they cannot replicate the source. And the source is you. The source is the unnameable, uncopyable, unreplicable essence of someone who didn't just stumble into their greatness, but built it slowly, painfully, privately, in the dark, without applause, without an audience, without any guarantee it would ever be seen. That kind of origin story cannot be faked, and they know it. So what does it feel like when the truth slaps someone who spent years building a false narrative? Let me paint the picture for you. It doesn't arrive as a dramatic confrontation. It doesn't come with fireworks or a speech. The truth arrives quietly, the way the dawn arrives, slowly, then all at once. One morning they wake up and the story they've been telling stops adding up. The math doesn't work anymore. The person they described as irrelevant is too present to be irrelevant. The person they dismissed as finished keeps not being finished. And the dissonance is deafening. They start doing the math, and the math is brutal. Every year they spent waiting for your collapse was a year you spent building. Every month they spent spreading doubt about your ceiling was a month you spent raising it. Every week they devoted to predicting your failure was a week you spent making failure less and less of an option. And suddenly, the scoreboard that they were certain showed them winning looks completely different in the light of reality. Suddenly, their wins look small. Their momentum looks borrowed. Their confidence looks performed. The slap isn't just the realization that you succeeded. The slap is the realization that their opposition didn't stop you. That's the part that leaves a mark. Because if you had failed, they could say their analysis was correct. If you had broken, they could say their pressure worked. But you didn't break. You didn't fold. You didn't go where they pushed you. And that means every single thing they believed about their own power over your narrative was false. That's not just a loss. That's a complete structural collapse of the story they told themselves about who they were in relation to you. And now they have to sit with something that cannot be unseen. They have to sit with the knowledge that while they were practicing, you were performing. While they were running rehearsals, you were running the actual show. While they were building strategies to manage you, you were building an empire they didn't have clearance to enter. The roles were never what they thought. The power dynamic was never what they assumed. The whole time they believed they were studying you from a position of advantage. They were actually watching a masterclass they didn't have the capacity to understand. There is a specific kind of psychological weight that comes with being wrong about someone for years. It's not just embarrassment. It's not just regret. It's a full audit of everything you believed about yourself, in contrast to them. Every moment of superiority you felt, re-examined. Every conversation where you confidently predicted their limitations, playing back on a loop. Every smug observation you shared with your allies, returning now with new context and new consequence. They don't just feel wrong about you. They feel wrong about themselves. And that is what the truth slap actually costs. Let's talk about your silence, because your silence was never nothing. Your silence was the most sophisticated move on the board. While they were loud, strategically, performatively, intentionally loud, you were quiet, and they mistook that quiet for absence. They thought your silence meant you weren't there, weren't watching, weren't building, weren't compiling. They thought silence was passive. They were wrong. Your silence was architecture. Your silence was construction happening underground while they stood on the surface and declared the ground empty. Every time you chose not to respond, you chose to build instead. Every time you chose not to defend yourself publicly, you chose to add another floor to something private. Every time you let them talk, let them theorize, let them congratulate themselves on a victory that didn't exist yet, you were buying time. Not because you were afraid, not because you didn't have the words, but because you understood something they didn't. The person who responds to every provocation never has time to create, and creation was always the only point. They needed you loud. They needed you reactive. They needed you in the comment section, in the drama, in the argument, at the table where they set the rules. Because as long as you were playing their game, you couldn't build your own. As long as you were spending energy defending your name, you couldn't be adding value to it. They needed you distracted. They needed you exhausted. They needed you so consumed with managing their perception of you that you had nothing left for the actual work. But you didn't give them that. You protected your energy like it was currency, because it was, and now your silence has spoken. Not in words, but in results. Not in explanations, but in evidence. The work exists. The track record exists. The receipts exist in a form that cannot be argued with, cannot be spun, cannot be reframed through someone else's narrative lens. The silence that they read as weakness was actually the extended pause before a sentence so powerful it needed time to land correctly, and it's landing now, right now, on all of them simultaneously, and the landing is not gentle. You never needed to announce what you were building. The announcement is the building itself. You never needed to prove your worth to people who had already decided your ceiling. Your worth proved itself by exceeding every ceiling they assigned you. Quietly, consistently, without fanfare. That's what silence builds. Not noise, not attention, not the short-term satisfaction of being right in a moment, but the long-term, undeniable, permanent reality of a life that justifies itself through its existence. They can't argue with existence. They can only adjust to it. So while they had their binoculars trained on you, trying to catch you slipping, trying to document your struggles for their own psychological comfort, what were you actually doing? You were evolving. You were studying your own patterns and identifying the weaknesses they never knew existed and fixing them privately. You were acquiring skills they never thought to look for, because they were too busy watching for failure to notice the accumulation of excellence. You were becoming someone different every 90 days. Not in a way that showed on the surface, but in a way that restructured you from the inside out. You were building your discernment. Every person who revealed their true intentions taught you something. Every betrayal was a masterclass in reading rooms. Every moment of disappointment upgraded your filter. Every experience that hurt was a calibration. And calibration is expensive. Most people don't get it. Most people stay confused about human nature their whole lives, because they protect themselves from the lessons that come disguised as pain. You didn't protect yourself from the pain. You processed it, you metabolized it, you turned it into intelligence. You were building your standards. Every person who treated you as less than inadvertently showed you what less than looks like up close. So now you recognize it from a distance. You feel it before it arrives. You know the texture of it, the temperature of it, the specific gravity of it, and you walk away from it before it even has time to settle. The people who were designed to lower your standards ended up raising them, because now you know exactly what you will not accept. And that knowledge is power that cannot be purchased. It can only be earned through exactly the kind of experience you've survived. You were building your network quietly, not the loud network of connections made at events and maintained through performance. The deep network, the kind made in honest conversation when neither person is trying to impress the other. The kind built in the shared experience of actually doing difficult things. The kind that does not require maintenance through constant visibility because the foundation is real. While they were focused on who you were connected to publicly, you were deepening the connections that would matter when it actually counted. And those connections, invisible to everyone watching from the outside. You were building your relationship with yourself. And this is the one that changes everything, because you cannot be manipulated by people trying to make you doubt yourself if you genuinely, deeply, with full evidence and no illusions, know yourself. They tried to write your story. They tried to define your character from the outside. They tried to make you see yourself through their distorted lens. But you were simultaneously doing the hard, slow, private work of seeing yourself clearly, without the lens, without the filter, just the truth of what you are, what you're capable of, and what you're here to do. When we say you were the secret boss, we're not talking about a title. We're not talking about authority that was announced, granted, or bestowed by anyone else. The secret boss is something different. The secret boss is the person in any room who could leave and take the energy with them. The person whose absence would be felt more than most people's presence. The person who didn't need to be the loudest, because when they spoke, the quality of the silence that followed said everything. You have been that person. You have always been that person. The secret boss doesn't need credit. Credit is for people whose confidence depends on external validation. The secret boss operates from an internal scorecard that doesn't require anyone else's signature. You know what you've built. You know what it cost. You know what it took to keep going on the days when stopping would have been so much easier, so much more justifiable, so much more reasonable. You kept the receipts not to show anyone, but because integrity means you answer to the truth even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. The secret boss doesn't chase. They don't chase recognition, don't chase approval, don't chase the rooms that aren't built for them yet. They build their own room. They set the terms. They determine the culture. They decide what is acceptable and what isn't, not by demanding others follow rules, but by simply refusing to be in spaces that violate their standards. There is no negotiation. There is no compromise of core values for the sake of belonging. There is just the quiet, unshakable certainty of someone who knows that the right room will find them because they're building it. The secret boss understands leverage in a way that most people never do. Not the leverage of threats or power plays, but the leverage of irreplaceability. When you have cultivated something genuine, something rare, something that cannot be produced by anyone else in exactly your way, you have leverage that doesn't require force. You don't have to demand to be respected. Your presence makes the demand. You don't have to ask for your worth to be recognized. Your absence reveals it. And they discovered this the expensive way. They discovered what you were worth by what happened to their world when you stepped back from it. And here is the final note on the secret boss. The secret only existed for them. It was never a secret to you. You knew what you were. You knew what you carried. You knew the weight of the thing inside you that wouldn't let you quit, wouldn't let you settle, wouldn't let you accept a version of your life that fell short of the full expression of what you were built for. The secret was theirs to keep in ignorance. The knowing was always yours. Let's talk about what happens to the watchers now, because the story doesn't end with your ascension. It continues in their reality, in the quiet aftermath of a realization they cannot unhave. They're going to start questioning the narrative. Not loudly, not publicly, but internally, in the uncomfortable hours when performance stops and self-examination begins. They're going to start pulling at threads, and every thread they pull is going to unravel something they built their confidence on. Because when the foundation of I was right about them collapses, everything built on top of it collapses too. Their alliances are going to feel thinner, because alliances built on shared opposition to someone only hold as long as the opposition is justified. The moment you become undeniable, the moment your truth becomes public record, the alliances forged against you become evidence of misjudgment. And Nobody wants to be associated with a misjudgment at that scale. So the quiet distancing begins, the reevaluation of positions, the sudden discovery of nuance where previously there was only certainty. And they'll watch each other pull away and understand exactly what they built and what it was worth. Their wins will start to feel qualified, because wins are only as satisfying as the context they exist in. A victory over someone irrelevant feels hollow. A victory over someone who was actually the blueprint feels like a theft of something that now has full legal ownership revealed. Everything they claimed credit for, they'll start auditing. Every advancement they celebrated, they'll privately reconsider the source of. And the reconsideration will be painful, because the answer in too many cases will lead back to you, to influence you had, to standards you set, to movement you started, that they redirected and renamed. They won't be able to replicate your results. This is perhaps the most clarifying thing that will happen over time. They can copy the surface behaviors. They can adopt the aesthetic. They can rehearse the tone. But results are not produced by the surface. Results are produced by the root work, the internal architecture, the values and habits and disciplines that nobody sees and that cannot be faked over time. They'll keep running the drills. They'll keep refining the imitation. But the ceiling they hit will always be lower than yours, because they're building on a foundation they borrowed. And borrowed foundations crack under real weight. Some of them, not all but some, will have a private moment of honesty, in the quiet, away from their audience, away from the performance of their certainty. Some of them will acknowledge, to themselves alone, that they were wrong. Not as confession, not as apology, just as truth, admitted in private, because the alternative